Hi, I was on a social media page yesterday and I was reading some posts, and somebody said that they were writing a story. And their question was something on the lines of how much setup is too much. They are 13,000 words into their story, and there has been some interaction between their characters, and not too much, but eventually the book will have forced proximity and some spice. Okay, the first thing is, and a lot of people will tell you this if you go on to any page and say, hey, what can I do in my book? The answer is whatever you want. It's your story. It's your world. Even if you place it in our world, you're making up the rules. You can change things and alter them because ultimately you are creating your own world. But in this particular scenario with forced proximity, it often has one of two things: either strangers, and in the case of strangers, the forced proximity often happens early. So this could happen pretty soon, but usually the spice doesn't happen prior to the forced proximity. So if they haven't had anything spicy yet, that makes sense. That's what the forced proximity does. And the other scenario where this happens is enemies to lovers. And the big complaint that you hear all the time with enemies to lovers is there's no real setup of the enemies. Like if they're enemies to lovers, if you don't want it to sound fake, set them up as enemies. And that's not just one or two chapters. Like, make sure they are enemies first. They don't like each other. And the thing with enemies to lovers, and this is my opinion, this might not be everybody's, they both don't have to be enemies. In a lot of situations with enemies, one of the two could be apathetic. One of the two might be somewhat interested, but one of the two should be like, no, I do not like this person. Ugh. And then you get halfway, 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of the way into the book, and then you have your forced proximity. And then that hate, that anger, that enemy, that emotion flips. And that's when the steam comes out. And yeah, you're not gonna have a lot of steamy scenes between these two characters when it's enemies until that forced proximity. But in both situations, strangers or enemies to lovers, they're not gonna be doing anything until that forced proximity. So yeah, it's okay to wait because that's what you're setting up.